extraordinary job of teaching their sons the ins and outs of the family business. Well, it so happens that the family business is armed robbery, but they were doing a terrific job with these boys. They taught them how to use an AK-47 rifle. They taught them to memorize police codes so they could use a police scanner and give them an advantage. They taught them how to surveil a target, how to reconnoiter an escape route, some evasion concepts, some survival techniques if necessary. They taught them how to memorize maps. They taught them even hand-to-hand combat. And after each family outing or robbery they committed, they had a debriefing with the kids. They went through and they talked about mistakes that were made and things they needed to correct, errors that needed to be improved upon. Now, I think this mom and dad are despicable, but I'll give them credit. They prepared their kids for what they thought mattered most. Isn't that one of a parent's primary responsibilities? To instruct our children in the important skills of life? You know, parents do well to teach our kids things like basic hygiene, proper manners, how to build bridges to other people, a work ethic. And as Christians, along with teaching life skills, we also seek to teach the ways of God. We seek to teach our children how to walk with God, how to love and worship Jesus. Now, maybe you don't think it's important. I hope you do. If you're a believer, I hope you believe in the gospel that we're all sinners. And the only way to eternal life is through Jesus Christ. And what could be more important than to teach our kids how to walk with God? Well, this morning I want you to think about this with me. Here's the question. What have you decided that you intend to teach your kids specifically? What specifically do you want them to learn and know? I hope it's about Jesus. You know, if I teach my children so that they could gain the whole world, but they forfeit their souls, what good will it be to them? There will be a day, Jesus said, when He's going to come back. He said He is going to come in His Father's glory with His angels, and then He will reward each person according to what he has done. So as important as it is that I teach my children the way of the world, there is nothing more important than teaching them the ways of God, so that they will know how to walk humbly with our God. 29 times in the Old Testament, we are commanded as God's people to walk in His ways. And then, the Psalms and the Proverbs and the prophets routinely speak of God's people walking in His ways. Can you think of something that's more important? Can you think of anything in the world that's more important than to teach your children to love and worship Jesus? Isn't that the greatest responsibility we have? So I want us to consider this morning this responsibility from two perspectives. One is from us as families, as parents, and then also, secondly, from the perspective of the church. When God established Israel in their homeland, He told them, here's how you walk in my ways. And if you read Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, you'll get that picture. This is God saying, here specifically is what I want you to learn to do so that you can walk in my ways. But God wanted them to do more than just print the Ten Commandments up on a fancy poster and put it in a frame and hang it on the wall. He wanted them to actually do the stuff that He was talking about. And He wanted them to remember what He was saying to them. I'm going to read the text here in just a minute from Deuteronomy. And as I do, I want you to think of two things. One is that this is a command to be creative in how we get the Word of God in our minds and into the minds of our families. And then secondly, notice that it's a command specifically to teach our children. Okay, so let me read this. Fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be many in the land that the Lord swore to give your forefathers, as many as the days that the heavens are above the earth. Did you hear the mnemonic tools that He offered in there, so that we would remember these things? You know, during prayer, Jewish men, and some still do, wear a thing called a phylactery. Do you have that image there for me? that little box, it's a leather box, there's 4 divisions in it. And those 4 divisions have little tiny scriptures written on there. They have 2 from Exodus and 2 from Deuteronomy with these basic commands of God. And they took it very seriously. That God said, write them on your forehead. So they wrote them, put them in those boxes, and some guys still do that. When they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Qumran community, they found some of these left over. So it's really going on. Now another way they did, show the second one. You talk about writing it on your forearms. A lot of guys would wrap that thing around there. That was the reminder of them of all the things that God said. Now the key was not that you would wear this thing on your head and wrapped around your arm. The key is that you would remember God's words. It's not about wearing a goofy box on your forehead. It's about remembering all the ways of God. Teach them to your children, he said. That's not just a command, although just the command itself ought to be enough, shouldn't it, for us to teach our children? But it's also good logic. Because the world is not going to teach your children to walk in the ways of God. It's part of the sinful nature of man that we tend towards following our own ways. And so if our children and grandchildren are going to follow God, then we have to teach them. They will not just pick it up on their own. We have to be specific in teaching. Now, your kids will pick up a lot of things from you. They will learn what to say when you stub your toe. They will know what to do when some idiot driver cuts you off in traffic. They'll know what to say when you see something amazing. They'll say, holy, you fill in the blank in here. But if you want them to learn to walk in the ways of God, you have to teach it. You can't just hope they'll pick it up from you. Now we know that parental involvement in education greatly enhances a child's opportunity for success. A child who is a good reader generally has a mom and dad who read to him or her in their arms. A child who is excited about learning generally has parents who are excited about learning. A child who values playing by the rules has parents who value playing by the rules. A child who believes it's important to walk in the ways of God has parents who believe it's important to walk in the ways of God. And how important is it to walk in the ways of God? Listen to how he finished this teaching. I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you obey the commands of the Lord your God that I'm giving you today. The curse, if you disobey the commands of the Lord your God. See, your decision to teach your children to walk in the ways of God leads them to the blessing. Your failure to teach them to walk in the ways of God leads them to a curse. Now, the New Testament taught the same thing. In a passage where Paul was writing specifically to fathers, he said, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. Bring them up in the ways of the Lord, and they will receive the blessing. Bring them up without the ways of the Lord, and they will receive the curse. Now, dads, you play a critical role in your child learning to walk in the ways of God. Several years ago, U.S. News and World Report, hardly a conservative magazine or family-friendly magazine, concluded more than any other factor, a father's presence in the family will determine a child's success and happiness. David Blankenhorn of the Institute of American Values wrote in 1999, the most urgent domestic challenge facing the United States at the close of the 20th century is the recreation of fatherhood as a special role for men. A good father does 3 basic things. He provides for his family, protects his family, and gives spiritual and moral guidance. Guys, I couldn't say it any better than that myself. Gentlemen, the responsibility is not exclusively ours, but it is ours first. We can raise our kids to enjoy the blessings of God, or we can raise them in a way where they can experience the curse of God. We can raise our kid with impeccable academic credentials. We can help them become superb athletes. We can give them a fine house to live in. We can give them every measure of worldly success. But if we leave them without an understanding of how to walk in the ways of God, we have led them to the curse. There is no greater gift that we can give our children and our grandchildren than to teach them to love and worship Jesus. And the 3 best ways to do that are 1, example, 2, example, and 3, example. To bring your child up in the way he should go, you travel that way yourself. You see, we teach kindness by being thoughtful and gracious, even at home. We teach patience by being gentle and understanding, again, 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 we teach honesty by keeping our word, even when it costs us. We teach courage by living unafraid in faith and in all circumstances. We teach justice by being fair and dealing equally with all people. Surveys have shown that children whose mother took them to church regularly have a 30% probability of continuing in faith as adults. We learned yesterday from Gary, statistically, right now, 2 out of 10 kids who grew up in church will still be in faith when they're 29 years old. The other 8 won't be. That's in America. That's how it is in America. Children whose father took them to church, 70% chance that they will still be involved. Children whose father and mother brought them to church, 80% chance. We should take this very seriously, friends. Now, there's no guarantee. But you ask a parent who became a Christian later in life, you just ask them, do you wish you had started teaching this to your children when they were little? And I guarantee you what they will say. I wish I had. I wish I had found this earlier so that I could help my kids, because they feared for where their kids who are walking far from Christ. Let me take a moment to promote our men's retreat. We're going to talk about specific things, guys, that we need to be teaching our kids. This is for dads and grandpas. What are the things that we're going to be teaching? I've got 2 little grandkids, and I'm looking forward to helping them help teach them about Jesus. But I'm going to know specifically what I want to teach them. And that's what we're going to talk about at our men's retreat. So please think about that. Teach these things to your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you get up. I encourage you, parents, bring your children to church and Sunday school every week. That's more important even than you getting them to public school every Monday through Friday. Public school is good. They learn lots of good stuff, but it's nothing. If they learn all of that, if they do not learn how to walk with Jesus, they get the curse instead of the blessing. Now, I said we would talk about this also from the perspective of the church, so let's do that. The church should partner with parents to teach our children. The partnership of family and church has a tremendous influence on Christian faith, going from one generation to the next and to the next. There are things that you, and only you, should be teaching your children, but there are things that we can help you with. And I think we should. So I want to talk to our church. When I say I want to talk to our church, it's all of us, not just some of us. All of us. Listen up on this. Now, as I was working through this, I'm sitting in my office and I'm having a snack of an apple because I forgot to bring the carrot sticks with me. So you know me. So I'm gnawing on this apple, working it down to the core, which, by the way, is the proper way to eat an apple. And I went too far and I exposed one of the seeds. And it made me think about a quip I had read one time. You can count the seeds of an apple, but you can't count the apples in a seed. So a little pocket knife surgery revealed that my apple had 5 seeds in it. John Chapman lived from 1774 to 1845. His last years were spent in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The Fort Wayne Tin Caps baseball team are named for him. You know him as Johnny Appleseed. He planted apple trees in Ontario, Canada, in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Now, if you knew precisely how many apple seeds he planted, you still wouldn't know how many apples that he was responsible for. Now think of the implication of those few words. You can't count the apples in the seed. It's inspiring to me to know that we cannot calculate how many people we reach when we teach our children. When we teach our children about how to walk with Jesus, to love and worship Jesus, we do not know how many people are going to be reached by that with the gospel because we taught them. You may teach a class of 1 kid, or 2, or 14, but that's not how many people you reach with. You cannot count how many. As I stand here, we've got, what, maybe 100 people in here? How many, with divine multiplication, am I reaching today from the sermon that I wrote? You know, our division statement and the motto of our church is knowing and growing in Christ, and it's taken from the Great Commission, where Jesus said to the church, all authority has been given on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. See, Jesus is saying the same thing. He said, teach people, teach children, teach adults as well, but teach children. Now, he didn't say how many we're supposed to teach at a time. He just said teach. Whether it's 1 or 5 or 500, teach. You just knew the principle. You can count how many people are in your class, but you can't count how many people are being reached when you teach that child. And how much spiritual fruit will each child bear? How many individuals will each child or adult reach after we have taught them to love and worship Jesus? So you're not reaching just one kid. You're reaching every kid that kid reaches. The actual total of souls reached by your teaching is known only to God. Now think with me, not out loud. I'll think out loud, you think quietly. Who is responsible to do the teaching in the church? Who did Jesus speak to when he said, go and teach? Was he talking to Ben? Was he talking to Teresa? Was he talking to Cassie? Was he talking to Oscar? Jesus said, go and teach. Who's he talking about? Did he mean just certain people? Did he mean elders and deacons in the church? You go and teach. Did he mean just people with special training for Bible teaching? Rod and Ben, it's yours. You guys can care. A few weeks ago in our series on the book of Hebrews, we read Hebrews chapter 5, verses 11 and 12. That was it followed a discussion about Jesus as the high priest for Christians. And he said, he then wrote this, he said, we have much to say about this, but it is hard to explain, listen to this, because you are slow to learn. In fact, although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the elementary truths, the ABCs of truth, of God's Word all over again. Now, we made clear at the time that this letter was written to people just like us. It was just written to a church, folks like us, go to work every day. But on Sundays we come and worship. Let me highlight this phrase. By this time, you ought to be what? Learners? You ought to be teachers. Doesn't that sound like that author of Hebrews believes that we should be learning so that we can teach? That it's not just for someone else. Doesn't that sound like to you that Joe and Mary Christian ought to be growing in their faith and in their knowledge so that they can teach their children and help you teach your children? William Barclay is perhaps the preeminent biblical commentator of all times. Interesting thing, he's actually a homiletics preaching professor, but his best stuff is done in commentary. Anyway, he was commenting on this in his thing, and he was rather uncomplimentary. He basically said that Christians all ought to be teachers, but they don't. And when it says slow to learn, he translated that you're dull of hearing. And he used a very poignant word there. Nothros means to be witless or senseless. Okay? But here's what he did. He made an illustration, and I'll illustrate it this way. Years ago, when I was the police chaplain, one night, the officer I was riding with, we got called out by the fairgrounds because a cat had been hit by a car and broke its back. And it was, if you've ever seen it, it's very miserable to watch. The cat's still alive, in great pain. There's nothing you can do for him. So we had to go and dispatch that cat. Barclay said that word nothros, it describes that cat. A living critter that is useless, that is witless and senseless, because he's dead. He's just waiting to finish dying. Barclay is saying that's people who are Christians who don't learn enough to go teach. Again, I said, that's not very complimentary. Here's what he said. The reason they don't is because they're lazy. He said they're lazy thinkers. That's why some of us don't teach, because we're too lazy to be learning enough that we can teach. Back to my point. Jesus gave this commission to the whole church. He said, go and make disciples, teaching them. And the writer of Hebrews agreed with him and challenged listeners to grow up, to grow so you can teach. And I draw two conclusions from this. One is that the church should partner with parents in teaching our children how to love and worship Jesus. And that should be what we're all about, and I believe it is. It was very affirmed yesterday in our seminar with Gary as he encouraged our church in the things we're doing. But secondly, the second conclusion I draw from this is that the responsibility of teaching is not limited to a few. See, it's all of us. It's every one of us here. We're all responsible to help teach children how to love and worship Jesus. It's our responsibility. It's not yours. It's not someone else's. It's ours. And if the church is going to help teach children how to walk in the ways of God, how to love and serve Jesus, we better have something to offer. You know, we're putting some real special effort here in 2019 to strengthen the children's education part of our church. And I thank you all for supporting that. Thank you. Not everybody supported it when we approved the budget, but most did. And so far, we have kept up in our giving so that we're over budget. We're not losing anything there. And I thank you for that. You know, I'm very thankful for what Teresa's doing. You know, we made a good choice hiring her full-time. She's doing way more than we expected out of her already. And many of you have stepped up and started helping. Your teachers or your helpers or your hall monitors. We have quite a group of volunteers. We can always use more. Teresa, if you are on our email, if you get the email blast when we do the constant contact, you got the letter from her this week. And I don't think she ever anticipated being quoted in a sermon, but she's going to be. She said, what a blessing to have so many volunteers. Now listen to this. She said, it's a larger blessing to have a need for more volunteers. God bless you, Teresa. I'm so proud of her. Many hands make light work. You know, the more of us who participate in teaching, the less any one person has to be burdened by it. You know, you'll hear people talk about, oh, I just got tired of it. You know what? You don't get tired of it if you don't have to do it all. If you got other people helping. Get the point? I want to encourage you who are presently involved, don't quit. Don't think you're too old. Don't think you're tired. You know, you don't know how many people you're reaching when you teach one kid in a Sunday school class. And when Jesus made the command, he didn't put any limits on it. He didn't say, go into all the world and teach, make disciples and teaching them until you get tired, or until you get old, or until you've done it for 30 years. You know, some of you have been teaching forever. I hope you keep teaching forever. I hope you die in your teaching position. I hope I die in the pulpit. Not real quick. You get the point, don't you? We teach. I also want to encourage and challenge you who are not presently involved in teaching. You're not too old. You're not too young. One of the things Gary told us, his church is a bunch of thousand people, I don't know how many. Half of their teachers are high school and middle school kids, are teaching the lower level. I was pretty impressed with that. We've got wonderful kids in our church. You guys can help. You're not too anything to not teach and not be a part of it. Every one of us. Every one of us can be, even if you're already involved in other areas of ministry here in the congregation, you can still take a turn. Because the more people that do it, the less burned out anyone gets, and we keep it going, and we teach our children how to love and worship Jesus, how to walk in the ways of God. Now I realize that there are some people who are never going to be involved in teaching. You don't feel it, you don't like it, you don't plan to be a teacher. Here's a challenge for you. If you don't like this, pull your toes back as you read this down. I want you to, when you say your prayers tonight, I want you to tell Jesus why you're not teaching. I want you to say, Jesus, here's why I don't teach. I'm serious. I'm not making fun of anybody. I want you to seriously do that. Jesus, I can't teach and I won't teach, and here's why. Now, if you're still comfortable not helping after you have done that, let me give you one other challenge, okay? Because I'm certain someone is going to try it, and you're still not going to feel like participating. How about then you increase your giving to this congregation so we can afford to pay Teresa to do what she's doing. And we can buy the supplies we need to, so that others can do the teaching. If you're not going to get involved in it, at least support it, okay? Most people have been doing pretty well with that, we think. I'm very excited for what people are going to say about Agape Christian Church after 2019. They're going to say that church teaches children to love and worship Jesus, to walk in the ways of God. That's what they're going to say. Harley and James were cousins. They were partners. Harley's father had founded a company that made candle and soap, and they provided soap for the soldiers of the North during the American Civil War. Well, after the war, Harley decided that this company needed to do something new. So he decided that he wanted to make a white soap that would be the best soap on the market. And so he got his cousin James and he said, look, you're the chemist, develop a formula so we can make white soap. So that he did. And they started selling it. Didn't do very well. One day, Clown, you can't make this up, that's his name, Clown. He was the overseer of production and he had the machine going that was mixing it, and he went to lunch and forgot to turn the machine on. Well, when he came back, an hour or so later, he had found that the machine had mixed too much air into the soap. Well, he didn't want to waste all the product, so he poured it into the hardening molds and hoped for the best, but figured he would get fired. Well, when the bars of soap came out and they went out to the public, there was an immediate reaction. The consumers loved the soap that floats because they could wash in, when they dropped the bar, it didn't go to the bottom under the murky water, and it was easy to find. And since many of them washed in a stream, they knew where their soap was, and it became a real hit. It was so good that the cousins decided to change the production plan so that it always got too much air in it. They also changed the name. They called it white soap. But borrowing from Psalm 45, verse 8, all thy garments smell of myrrh and aloes and cassia, out of the ivory palaces whereby they make thee glad. So they named it Ivory Soap. And the partnership of Harley Procter and James Gamble continues today to make quality, hygiene, and cleaning products. That's the value of a good partnership. There are things that you and only you can and should teach your children. And there are things that we can and should be helping to teach here at our church. That's a partnership. And that partnership is very valuable. There are a lot of children running around this church. Thank you for bringing them. You are showing them by your example that it matters that you love and worship Jesus. And so I encourage you to keep teaching them at home and keep bringing them here. We are partners. We are partners with you to teach our children to love and serve Jesus.